Let's go to John Lott now, the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center and the author of Gun Control Myths. He's joining us now. John, great to have you back with us, sir.
Oh, great to talk to you. Glad your phones are working.
The phones are working. Now, give me a sense, and thank God for that. Give me a sense of what the left is getting wrong here, what Kamala in particular is getting wrong here about guns.
Well, Biden has probably been, I don't think without question, the most pro-gun control president that we've had. He's put thousands of gun dealers out of business. He's gone and put together a national gun registry. He's gone and revived Obama's Operation Choke Point, which has debanked many companies so they can't have financial institutions working with them. But if anything, Kamala Harris is well to the left of them. You know, when they were both running for president for the 2020 election, both of them supported an assault weapons ban, but she supported a mandatory confiscation of the guns. And she went even further. She was saying that she thought that she could accomplish all that through executive order if she couldn't go and get a bill passed through Congress. And, you know, it's worse now even than it was before, because given that we have this national registry that the Biden administration has put together, they're going to have a pretty good idea of what guns different people own. And so it's much easier for them to go and have this mandatory confiscation than it would have been 4 years ago.
Yeah. So tell me about the National Gun Registry. How did Biden stand it up? How is it different than what existed before?
Federal law prevents the federal government from putting together a national gun registry. Obviously, the Obama administration got caught a couple times keeping the records of all the background checks. They're supposed to destroy them after 24 hours after the background check has been completed. But Biden has been too cute by half. They say, well, the way they read the law is that they can't actually use a national gun registry. And so what they've done is, as of about 2 years ago, there hasn't been any updates on this, they had computerized almost 1 billion transactions for guns over many decades. And they said, well, as long as we have it computerized but don't actually use the data files that are there, then we're within the scope of the law. But you'll hear things like Bank of America turning over credit card records to the Department of Justice for people who use their Bank of America. The reason why they're doing that is to go and help put this registry together that they have.
The idea that they don't have ready access to a registry, I've always thought was absurd. I mean, look what happened just a couple weeks ago. Thomas Crooks gets on that roof. He takes a couple shots at Trump and thankfully misses him, but he does murder another man in the crowd, wounds 2 others.
Right.
Obviously, he hit Trump, wounded him in his ear. That goes without saying. But they identified him within like 4 minutes because they just looked at the gun and they said, oh, that belonged to his dad. The government knew that instantly because they keep a registry.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, they can go to the people that, sold the gun, and they have records of who sold what guns. And it's been possible for them for decades to go and check these things. This just make it easier for them to do it. And also it's the reason why they push things like universal background checks, and that you heard Harris talk about a couple of times in those clips. They go and they say that the reason why they want these universal background checks is so that they can go and solve crimes. And that's simply not a serious comment that's there. We've had registration and licensing in Hawaii since 1960. We've had it in New York and Maryland and Chicago and Washington, D.C. And yet those jurisdictions can't even point to one crime that they've been able to actually solve, despite spending huge resources on setting up the licensing and registration systems. And, and there's a simple reason for that. In theory, if you have a criminal commit a crime with a gun and it's registered to the criminal and he leaves the gun at the crime scene, then in theory you can trace it back to the criminal. But as in the case of Crook, if somebody they almost never leave the gun at the crime scene. When they do, it's because the criminal's either been killed, as in Crook's case, or seriously wounded, so you've caught them anyway. Or if the gun is left there, it's because it's not registered to the criminal, and the once or twice that it is registered, it's not registered to the person who committed the crime. And so, but the only reason why you have these universal background checks in this National Gun Registry is to confiscate the guns at some point.
Yes.
It's not something, except for TV shows like Law and Order, it's not actually something that's used to solve crimes.
No, it's the federal government's way of gathering intel on potential adversaries, i.e., the American public. That's why.
Well, law-abiding American public. That's who they have the registry list for.
Yeah, for sure. Can you address the myths, the lies about background checks? From Kamala Harris, I feel like I've heard her say maybe within the last week. But regardless, the left says this all the time. They suggest that there's something called a gun show loophole, that gun dealers are going to gun shows and selling guns to American citizens without conducting a federally mandated background check. What's the truth there?
I mean, she's made that statement explicitly many times over just the last couple of years. She claims that licensed gun dealers, when they go to gun shows, don't have to go and do a background check. And so that's what they want to try to close. But anybody who knows anything about the law knows that a licensed gun dealer, whether they sell a gun at their store or they sell a gun at a gun show or they sell a gun any place, has to go and do a background check on it. And so, it's a nice talking point on them. What they really want to do is to make it so that all transfers, if you transfer a gun to a cousin or a relative or somebody like that, to try to make them go through a background check. And one thing that's not getting a lot of attention is she's essentially been the gun control czar in the Biden administration. When they set up this Office of Gun Violence Prevention that was there, Biden put out a statement saying that Kamala Harris was going to be the one who was going to be overseeing the operations for that. And they were involved in putting out these new ATF regulations that essentially defines virtually everybody as a firearms dealer. If you sell one gun and even talk to somebody else about selling another gun, even if you don't sell it, you need to be a licensed firearms dealer. If you sell one gun and keep the records of how much you sold it for and what you paid for it, even if it's just one gun, you have to be a licensed firearms dealer. And then they have all sorts of vague things there that basically say they'll know you're a licensed dealer when they see it, but they're not going to tell you specifically about all the rules that you might have to follow to make sure you don't violate the law on that. And so, but the reason, go ahead.
Sorry, finish your thought.
No, the reason why they're doing this, obviously, is to help put together this National Gun Registry that's there.
So, in her time as gun czar, has she made it so that fewer people die by guns? Has she succeeded in that mission?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you and I can go and talk about the errors in the FBI data on this stuff, but if you look at the Centers for Disease Control data on what you find is that homicides and homicides minus legal intervention are both higher in 2022, the last year that they're available for, than they were in 2020, the last year of the Trump administration, and much higher than they were prior to that in 2019 or earlier. So, yeah, I don't think they've been successful.
And all those gun deaths, are they result of an AR-15?
Right. I mean, you made a correct comment on this earlier. If you look at all murders, any rifle of any type, and obviously AR-15s are just a portion of that, account for about 2.8% of all murders in the United States. You have more people who are murdered with hands and fists. You have more people who are murdered with cutting instruments than you have murdered with any type of rifle in the United States. So, just as one thing I do want to bring up, one thing that she's pushed hard, and that her Office of Gun Violence Prevention has like as its top, or one of its couple top things that they want to accomplish, is changing the liability rules so that gun makers and gun sellers are liable for any harm that occurs with a gun. So they want to, Biden and Kamala Harris say, gun makers and gun sellers can't be sued. That's false. If you sell a defective gun, you can get sued. If you break the law in selling a gun, so as you don't go and do the background check, or you don't do it correctly, and somebody goes and commits crime, you will get sued. What they want to do is make it so that if somebody, you do a background check properly, and the person goes and does anything bad with the gun, you should be liable. Can you imagine if we applied that to cars, so that if somebody isn't paying attention when they're driving, should Ford be liable for all the medical costs, for all the lost wages, for all the pain and suffering, for all the healthcare costs that are there as a result? I mean, what would happen to the car industry if they were liable for all those things? It'd probably put a lot of the car companies out of business.
Yeah.
I mean, we have over 5 million people a year in the United States who are injured in car accidents.
Yeah, the left has an appetite for this, though. I mean, like cars as an example, remember the city of Chicago sued the car companies Kia and Hyundai, claiming that they were responsible for all the carjackings in the city because they didn't do enough to prevent carjackings. It's like they make cars. That's their job. Your job is to stop the criminals from stealing them, and the city tried to pass the buck on to Kia and Hyundai. So there's an appetite on the left to do this.
So it's going to be some car that's going to be the most stolen. Maybe they need to make cars that aren't attractive, so nobody wants to own them or possess them.
They're working on it. Lastly, John Lott, there was a moment in that audio, and I played several clips of Kamala talking about how she wants a so-called assault weapons ban again. We have tried this in the United States, what she's talking about. It started in 1994 and it concluded in 2004. What did the data show about crimes committed with guns during that time?
Well, if you look at for any type of rifle, you actually saw the number of crimes when the assault weapons ban sunset in 2004. Actually, the share of murders with rifles actually fell after that. If you look at so-called mass public shootings that are there, what you find is no matter what database you use for measuring those things, when the assault weapons ban sunset, the percentage of mass public shootings using assault weapons actually declined, which, and I would argue during the ban itself, it actually went up. The percentage of mass public shootings using assault weapons actually rose when the ban was in place there. But, people can find the data at our website at crimeresearch.org. We have Excel files that people can download and look at each of the cases that are there. But, the Biden administration, and Biden often will make the opposite claim. Democrats will make the claim. It's based on data from one researcher, Louis Corrivas, from the Teachers College at Columbia. And he has his own kind of unique definition of what's a mass public shooting.
Right.
But even if you take his numbers, the share of attacks with assault weapons fell after 2004 when it sunset. So you can't argue that that's driving more attacks if you have even a greater number of attacks with non-assault weapons that are occurring after that period.
Yes, and you're using the government's definition of assault weapon, but it's just wild. And notice they always say assault weapons, meaning they're going after rifles and law-abiding citizens. They never say we need a handgun ban. It's like what is this? At any rate,
well, Massachusetts just signed a law this week that would ban essentially any semi-automatic firearm that can hold a detachable magazine that is capable of holding more than 10 bullets.
Huh.
And so they've effectively banned virtually all semi-automatic guns if the courts were to uphold.
Is that true for government officials? Can cops have those guns?
I didn't see any. I read the bill. It's like 160 pages, or 116 pages, but I didn't see any exemption for police officers.
I bet you they can.
If there was.
Yeah, I bet you. It always works that way, right? The government gets to have better arms than the people. Okay, thank you very much, John Lott. As always, sir. Good to talk to you.